Okay, this is the first tutorial on the on-demand learning for OCR ASP, and you can see that we're going to be looking at surviving ethnic sports. In this tutorial we'll be looking at the characteristics of ethnic sports and the reasons why they have survived. So as you can see from the slide in front of you, we need to know exactly what surviving ethnic sports are. That would be one part of a question that you could be asked. So let's have a look at what we're talking about. So if we were asked, okay, what are surviving ethnic sports, we would hopefully be in a position to answer by saying something like this: they are traditional sports or activities that have been played for hundreds of years, and they've survived the test of time, and they're still played today. We're going to look at some of the characteristics, and we're going to look at why they've survived to the present day. So what are some examples of surviving ethnic sports? Well, you can see from the slide in front of you that examples could include Gloucestershire cheese rolling, mob football, Ashbourne football on Shrove Tuesday, Morris dancing even, or in fact Highland Games. But what we've got to understand is these are just examples of surviving ethnic sports. We don't need to go into too much detail about what they actually involve or be sidetracked to talk about the games themselves. We need to know the characteristics of those activities. And this is where we're likely to be examined. We're likely to be asked, okay, so what are the characteristics of surviving ethnic sports? And that's where we're going to get our marks. Again, we need to be very specific. If we're wishy-washy and woolly with our answering, we won't score credit marks here. So let's have a look at what those characteristics are. Now, the best way for us to go about tackling the characteristics of surviving ethnic sports is to think of the acronym FLORIST. So you can see I've put a florist there. Obviously, a florist sells flowers. However, the correct spelling of the florist is only with one T. Nevertheless, for this purpose, let's spell florist with two T's. The acronym then, each of those letters would indicate always the first letter of one of the characteristics of surviving ethnic sports. Let's have a look at each of those by turn. So the first F then is festival or ritual. We might get some way towards getting a credit for saying festival or ritual, but often we're asked what are the reasons for the activity surviving to the present day. So characteristics on their own may not be enough, so we need to talk about what the reasons are. So we'll say it's festival or ritual, and the reason that it's a festival or ritual is because in the past these have been traditional singing and dancing, carnival type atmospheres which have had evidence of pagan or medieval ritual in costume, etc. So the characteristic is it's festival or ritual. The reason is because lots of singing and dancing, a carnival type atmosphere. So the next characteristic in our FLORIST acronym is that it was local. These activities, these games took place locally, and often they were very unique to one specific area. So for example, our Gloucestershire cheese rolling takes place in one specific place, and it doesn't happen everywhere in the country. It's quite unique to this particular location. So local is our characteristic. The reason, it's unique to one particular area, and it increases local pride. The locals are very proud about this particular event or activity that is unique to their area. Next comes the O, which stands for, helps us to remember, occasional or annual. These events didn't happen often, so one of the characteristics would be that they were occasional, and they're still occasional to this day. So if we talk about mob football in Ashbourne, we know that it only happens on Shrove Tuesday, which is the day before Lent. Why does it survive? The reason for it surviving is because it may be that the modern day people, we want to escape from the pressures of the modern world, modern living, and return to this simple traditional type of activity and type of way of life that took place in the past. And these occasional or annual events often take place on what are commonly known as public holidays. Traditionally in the past they would have been holy days or sense days. So the R tells us that these activities are often rowdy, and rowdy means that they were often associated with drinking, singing and celebration. These activities took place, as we've just discovered, on holidays, saints' days, where the working people, the people at the time, would have been able to let their hair down and had a really good time. And so the reason that they've survived is because they're still drinking, there's still celebration, they're still singing, they're still having a really good time that's associated with these activities. Now the I stands for isolated. These activities tended to take place in rural locations in the countryside, and they were therefore relatively isolated from anything or anybody else. So if you can imagine a village that took part in a particular activity, because it was isolated, it was able to continue to survive because it was just the locals who took part, and it didn't get lost in some kind of urban development. So I stands for isolated. As we saw with the R for rowdy, S means that these were really social occasions, and of course with social occasions it was bringing together the community. And if we think about villages, there would have been one or two inns or pubs in which the focal would have been the focal point of the event. So S for social, the reason for that is because lots of fun, lots of coming together as a community, usually focused around the pub or the inn. Now the first T stands for traditional. If we think of something like Morris dancing, we ask, well, why is it that Morris dancing is still around? Well, clearly it's a very traditional activity that's been with us for hundreds and hundreds of years, and the reason that it's still around is because it's a celebration of the past. Morris dancing would have taken place a great deal back in pre-1800s, and therefore it's something which we've maintained and we're able to celebrate as what we used to do in the past, and therefore it was traditional. And our last T stands for tourism, and we can say that even way back at the beginning, when these activities were starting to take place, people would walk or travel, perhaps from other villages or from relatively local areas, to come and see these activities taking place. If we think of our Gloucestershire cheese rolling as our example, even now people come from a long, long way away to see this annual event. And it brings in a lot of people from outside. With obviously improved technology, improved transport, tourism brings media attention, which brings more money into the local community. So tourism is a really key characteristic of surviving ethnic sports, and the reason for it is because people want to come and see what's happening. Okay, so there we have the characteristics of surviving ethnic sports. We've got our FLORIST acronym, and we've identified those characteristics. However, for each one of those characteristics you must be able to give a reason. So it won't be enough just to say, it was occasional or annual. You need to say why. The reason is because these activities took place on holy days or bank holidays or public holidays, and that's why they only took place occasionally or annually. That is still the case now. You need to say why it was social. It was social because it took place around the inn or the pub, and it brought the community together. In terms of exam techniques, or in terms of exam questions, we need to examine exactly what we need to do to perform as well as we possibly can in this area. So that's why this title is called Pay Attention to Exam Technique. Absolutely crucial here. I can picture a question that might say, identify characteristics of surviving ethnic sports and give reasons for their survival. 4 marks. Now what you'd have to do is you'd have to identify 4 of our characteristics we can see in front of us, but in order to get a mark for each of those you need to give the reason. So just by saying it was local, it was occasional, it was isolated, and it was traditional is not going to score you your marks, because you've been asked to give reasons for their survival. Characteristics on their own will not be sufficient. Now the good news is it's a relatively small part of the syllabus, and there's only really one way they can ask questions on this, and that's exactly what I've just said. What are the characteristics and what are the reasons for their survival? If you're able to answer that fully, you should have absolutely no problem in this part of the specification. I hope this has been useful. Go back and listen to the slides over and over and make sure you've got the characteristics sorted out and those reasons.